Do you and your man, husband, partner argue a lot? Do you find that every time you go to approach a difficult conversation or you bring up a sensitive topic, it just spirals out of control into a full-blown conflict, disagreement? Well, in today's video, we are going to talk about how to avoid arguments. And while you can't always avoid an argument, so we're also going to talk about what you can do if an argument is inevitable, right? How do you want to navigate that situation? Specifically, the approach to take when you're going into that difficult conversation or that disagreement. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Mireille Nicole. I'm a relationship coach, and I'm so excited for you to be here. Today is such an important topic because I know for myself personally, when my relationship was at a low point with my husband, arguing was something that had just become so frequent in everyday life for us. We were arguing over anything and everything. We were having the same disagreements over and over again, and we just couldn't seem to break out of that pattern. So today we're going to talk about 2 steps you can take kind of before the argument or leading into that really difficult conversation. And these 2 steps are going to help you really tone down, diffuse whatever argument might have been there so it can be a much more productive conversation, right? This is going to help you. Maybe you're even going to be able to avoid the argument altogether with this approach. And if you can't avoid it, because like I said, that's not always possible, at least you'll be taking the best approach towards it to get the best results, right? These results being, not an argument that spirals out of control, an argument where you get to know each other better, you come to a consensus, and you grow stronger together as a couple. Okay, so the first part of this video is going to be all about mindset. The first thing I want you to think about and even start exploring this now before the next argument is your mindset. What is your mindset towards arguing, conflict in your relationship? How do you perceive this in a relationship? Do you see this as a negative thing? Do you see it as a battle, something where you have something that you need to win? You have stakes in it. You have to really get something out of it. Do you see arguments as something that leads to, discomfort and negative feelings and sadness and hurt? How do you perceive arguments? Because this is totally going to influence your vibe and your feeling going into it, and hence the actions and the words that you use. So the more you can shift this mindset around, the better your arguments are going to become. Or maybe, ideally, you're not going to start seeing these situations as arguments so much, right? What if you started seeing arguments as an opportunity for the both of you to maybe recalibrate on things that are going on in the relationship? What if you saw this as an opportunity to weigh out the pros and the cons of a certain challenge that you are facing, a certain obstacle that you have to overcome, or a big decision, right? A big heated decision full of emotions, full of complexity. What if you perceived arguments as an opportunity to get to know each other better, an opportunity to find out, okay, what makes my man really tick? What makes him, upset? What frustrates him, so that you know what to do or how to support him moving forward in the relationship? I know for myself, when I started exploring my mindset when it came to arguments, I started being in a better position to be much more rational when it came to these situations, these unavoidable disagreements that are going to happen no matter what. It's been said that, I think it's about 69 or was it 70% of issues in a relationship are unresolvable. So these are problems that you can't solve anyways, right? Because in a relationship, you are 2 people coming into it with different values, different experiences. So there's bound to be disagreement and not seeing eye to eye. So the faster you can embrace that and the more you can remember that fact, then the better it's going to be for you to navigate through these challenging times. And it's going to influence, like I said, the approach that you take. So I invite you to start looking at arguments in a different light. Really sit down with yourself, right? If you want to journal this, maybe write it out. What do arguments mean to you? How do you perceive arguments? And how can you shift that mindset in a different direction? How could you start perceiving arguments and really practice with that? And at the beginning, maybe it's just going to be, giving yourself a pep talk every now and then when something starts to frustrate you and you feel like you need to confront your man on a certain situation, something that might lead to disagreement. Really take a minute to really focus on, okay, How am I perceiving this? How can I think of this going into the conversation with my man? And if it's the other way around, where he's bringing up something that leads to conflict, he's, emotionally charged with the situation, again, take a deep breath and come back in your mind and try to rationalize it and think, okay, what can we achieve off of this, right? Out of this. Notice what he's going through. Notice the energy that he's bringing towards it. And it's okay to feel it. But at the same time, try to stay in your mind a little bit more. And remember, okay, disagreements, conflict, arguments, they're an opportunity for us here. They're an opportunity for us to grow through something, to really figure out how we're going to work through this obstacle, this challenge along the way in our relationship towards our happily ever after, because these things are going to come up inevitably. The second part of this is the approach going into the difficult conversation or the argument. So let's say you weren't able to diffuse it and you can see this going into a full-on argument. What is the approach that you are going to decide to take moving forward? Because obviously, if you're in a situation with your husband, your man, your partner, where you guys argue a lot and it keeps spiraling, there's a pattern there. And the only way to break that pattern is going to be to take a different approach, try different skills, use different actions or behaviors. So it's actually been said that they did some research on this with some couples that 96% of the time, experts can predict the outcome of a conversation, a difficult conversation, right within the first 3 minutes of a 15-minute interaction. So this is studies and research that came out of the Gottman Institute. So we have hard data that tells us how an argument begins is critical to the outcome of it. So I invite you to really pay attention to those first few minutes in the confrontation, right? Especially within for yourself. You're not going to be able to change the other person. So obviously you want to be aware of how they're reacting and recognize that and make sure that they feel like they are heard and they are seen and that you validate what they're going through. But at the same time, I invite you to focus on really yourself, right? And what's next steps you take. So when it comes to the approach in terms of leading into the argument, you really want to take what, again, John Gottman and his team call the soft launch approach. So really going into it, and I call it the Aphrodite approach. I think he said, the soft launch. I call it the Aphrodite approach because I like it. I think it's hotter. And so you're going to want to choose words that don't tend to set off the other person so much, right? Things that aren't usually associated with triggering him or whatnot. And a lot of times, like I know for myself, I was talking to a friend about this recently, and she was talking about how, she found her man was, upset a lot or something. So he'd be in a bad mood and she'd be like, "Are you mad at me?" Or "Are you mad?" And that would set him off right away. So the whole idea of the soft approach is not to launch in directly with that kind of wording. It's great normally to be direct with your man, to be concise and to the point. But when it comes to this type of conversation, I really encourage you to try, again, a more soft approach to this, a more, go in there in your power, not worried, are you mad or interrogating so much? You go there in your power in terms of you see your man. All right. So great ways to start off a conversation would be, I noticed you've been looking down lately. Is there anything going on? Or, I'm curious. I just noticed that, you're not in the mood to watch our shows together at night. You seem distracted, or I was just wondering if anything's going on. You seem, not interested in doing ... and insert whatever the situation is, right? So always start off to soften everything, to not unintentionally trip over a landmine, set something off, start with something that's very just, you're noticing something. There is no judgment. There's no accusation. There's no assumptions there. You're really just stating what you see, and you're noticing and you're showing interest and that you care. And then you can go into giving your man the opportunity to clarify what's going on. So flipping this around, if you find you're in the opposite situation where your man confronts you, you're not going into it and bringing up a sensitive topic. He comes to you with a situation and he starts talking and getting into it. And, you can feel right away, this is going to lead into an argument. The best thing you could do, number one, I'll always say, take a deep breath and just be curious. You can, again, use soft language like, Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, I'm glad you brought this up. What do you mean by that? Tell me more. And really give him the space to let, whatever needs to come out so that you can better understand the situation and you guys can go from argument, right, to just a negotiation or understanding better what he needs or whatnot. And if you need to bring something up, so the first scenario we talked about is if you notice something's going on with him and you kind of want to approach it and ask him what's going on, how to deal with that situation, how to go into it, right? So you just notice and ask. The second situation where he like approaches you and right away you notice he's in battle mode. And the third approach is if you want to bring something up, right? There's something that's happening, a need from your perspective that's not being met, then the best way to launch into this softly, to use that Aphrodite approach, is to ask him, right? You're going to want to ask him if it's a good time. So a lot of times an argument might just come up because the timing is off. And that's going to be huge. We underestimate the number of times that it's just either the timing that's off or the approach that we're taking this off, and it's not personal. So to remove any kind of perception that maybe you did something wrong or this is personal, I really highly encourage you to start considering that maybe it's the timing, maybe it's the approach, all right? And just asking him, is this a good time, is going to help clarify that for you and to make sure that when you go into that conversation, you guys can do so in a mature, respectful, and productive manner instead of just launching into this full-on battle that usually leads to people's feelings being hurt, saying things that we regret later on, right? When we really want to use these arguments as an opportunity to grow closer together and stronger as a couple. So like I said earlier, you're not going to always avoid arguments with this approach, but this is going to give you the best chance at making those conversations really productive and helpful and supportive to your relationship, and make it so that you guys can grow as a couple, feel satisfaction in overcoming obstacles together, and just dealing with life, being able to deal with life together and overcome those challenges. So I hope this was super interesting to you. Make sure you remember when you're approaching an argument or you feel one coming on, remember, what is your mindset? Check in with yourself. And number two, what's the approach you're going to take? What can you say? What words can you use that are not going to be just like a landmine that sets you guys off into this explosion of conflict and disappointment and frustration and resentment. I hope you like this video. Please let me know what you thought about it. Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. If you really enjoyed this video, another video you're going to like is The Art of the Argument. I will link to it here or here. I'm not sure where it's going to appear. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.